Silent old black man at shooting range reveals. Deadly secret SEAL recruit's tattoo. Exposes his true identity. Have you ever been judged the moment you walked into a room? Imagine landing at a busy airport, tired from a long flight, only to be stopped and questioned, not because of what you did, but because of who they expect you to be. This is the story of Aaliyah Harper, a young black woman with a first-class ticket-com confidence and an unshakable sense of self. But what happened next would shake the airport to its core. When Officer Dawson Reed decided to flex his authority, he didn't realize who he was really dealing with. Because Aaliyah's father isn't just anyone he owns the airline she just flew in on. Stay with us because this story is about power prejudice and the quiet strength that changes everything. He thought he was just flexing authority on another young black traveler until she calmly told him, "I'm calling my father." What he didn't know was her dad owns the airline she just flew in on. Have you ever landed somewhere familiar and still felt out of place? Aaliyah Harper had just touched down at LAX after a 4.5-hour flight from Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta. Her head throbbed from the stale cabin air and recycled chatter. She didn't rush off the plane like everyone else. She had learned to move slow when everyone else sped up. That's where you notice the details, the glances, the weight behind certain looks. She adjusted the strap on her cream leather duffel, stepped through the jet bridge, and followed the stream of passengers toward baggage claim. Her mother, Monica Harper, had texted during the layover, "I'll be in the pickup lane. Call when you're at the curb. Love you, eh?" Aaliyah smiled just thinking about her. She wore a sand-colored two-piece knit set and crisp white sneakers, effortless, not showy. Her braids were tied up neatly, a gold cuff around one just like her dad liked when she was younger. Said it made her look focused. First-class ticket still tucked in the sleeve of her passport. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, just comfortable in her skin like she always was. But airports have a strange way of making you feel watched, especially if you're not the expected type. She felt it before she saw him. The man had a stiff stance and a badge that gleamed more than necessary. Officer Dawson Reed posted up just past the first checkpoint. He didn't scan crowds. He scanned individuals, eyes narrow, jaw clenched, looking like he was waiting for someone to mess up. Aaliyah wasn't in a rush. She checked her phone and kept walking, but she could feel his eyes sticking to her. "Excuse me, miss," came the voice, direct-clipped. Aaliyah turned. "Yes. Can you step over here for me?" She blinked. "What for random screening? No wand, no scanner, no actual screening equipment nearby. Just him and a small podium." Aaliyah hesitated. "I already cleared security in Atlanta. I'm just trying to get to baggage claim." "Ma'am, I asked you to step over here." His tone sharpened like a blade drawn just an inch further. She glanced around. People were passing through without pause. A young white guy in a Dodgers jersey had earbuds in and a huge duffel strolling by without a word. A woman in business heels barely noticed them. But now eyes were creeping in from every angle, some curious, some cautious, most uninterested but all aware. Aaliyah walked the few feet over, keeping calm. Her shoulders were square. "Is there something specific you need to see?" "Just answering some questions, flight details, identification, that kind of thing." She pulled her boarding pass from her bag and handed it over, Flight 422 from ATL, First Class Seat 2D. Officer Reed looked at it longer than necessary. "First class," he repeated. He didn't hand it back right away. Aaliyah tilted her head. "Is there a problem?" "No problem," he said, "just doesn't add up." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What doesn't add up, you?" He handed it back, now slower. "You don't exactly look like our typical first-class passenger." The pause between each word felt intentional, measured, heavy. Aaliyah's chest tensed, but her face didn't flinch. "And what does a typical first-class passenger look like to you?" Reed didn't answer. He just smirked a smug little twitch at the corner of his mouth like he was waiting for her to get loud to make a scene. But she didn't. She slid the ticket back into her passport and looked him straight in the eye. "I'm going to baggage claim now." I didn't say you could leave. You didn't say why I had to stop you. He stepped closer, not enough to threaten, just enough to assert something invisible, something that hung in the air between them. I'm asking the questions. Aaliyah let a full second pass. And I'm asking if you have a reason to detain me. Reed's brow twitched. He didn't answer. He wasn't used to being checked, especially not like that. But Aaliyah wasn't scared. She was calculating. And the next thing she did would change everything. There's a look people get when they realize control is slipping, and Officer Reed was wearing it now. Aaliyah didn't move. She stood steady, passport in one hand, phone in the other, her thumb hovering just above the screen. Not calling anyone yet, not reacting. Just watching him with that same patience she learned from her father, the kind of patience that wasn't passive. It was power held in reserve. Reed shifted his stance. He wasn't done playing gatekeeper. Where were you coming from? He asked. I told you, Atlanta. Purpose of the trip? Personal. How long were you there? Aaliyah kept her gaze even. I was born there. I visit family every few months. Reed raised an eyebrow. You have identification to confirm that, like my ID. She pulled out her California driver's license and handed it over. It was valid, clean, nothing questionable. But he still held it like he was doing her a favor by giving it back. You always fly first class. Not always. My dad booked this one. Reed sniffed like he'd caught her in a lie. Must be nice. Aaliyah didn't bite. He circled a little, not physically, but in his questions, asking the same things again with slightly different words as if trying to trip her up. He asked about her bags, her seat number, the time she boarded. He asked who picked her up in Atlanta, where she stayed when she booked the ticket. People were watching now, not a crowd, not yet, but enough. A woman near the Starbucks paused long enough to make eye contact with Aaliyah, then quickly looked away when Reed turned his head. A baggage handler slowed down, pushing a cart of suitcases, pretending to check the tags. Aaliyah's voice stayed cool. She'd been taught to never match someone else's anger in public. That's how they flipped the script on you. But inside, her stomach burned. What is this really about? She asked finally. Reed smiled just barely. Like I said, routine. No one else from my flight is getting questioned. You don't know that. I was one of the first off the plane. I watched them walk right past you. You're getting defensive. I'm just asking you to explain what's going on. That's not defensive. That's fair. He stepped in again, slightly closer. You've got a little attitude. You've got a lot of assumptions. That hit not loudly but sharply. Reed stared at her for a beat. His jaw tensed. His voice dropped. Look, lady, I don't care how much that ticket cost or who paid for it. People who act like they're better than everyone else usually have something to hide. Aaliyah almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so tired, so weak. Better than everyone else, she repeated. You don't know anything about me. He ignored her. I see this a lot. Fly-in act entitled, mouth off when asked basic questions. You think I haven't seen this play out? She was done. Without saying a word, she unlocked her phone and tapped on a name in her favorites. Reed raised an eyebrow, amused. Who you calling? She looked him dead in the eye. My father. Oh, sure. Let me guess, lawyer, congressman, CEO. Aaliyah didn't answer. The phone rang twice, then she picked up. Aaliyah, you good? His voice was calm, smooth, and steady. She felt it wrap around her like armor. Daddy, she said softly but clearly, I need you at Terminal 4 Southwest baggage claim level. There's an officer here who thinks I don't belong. Pause. I'm on my way, he said. Nothing more. He didn't ask questions. He didn't yell. He just knew. Aaliyah ended the call and slid the phone into her back pocket. Reed chuckled. That's supposed to scare me? She raised one eyebrow. You'll find out soon enough. But what neither of them knew yet was just how quickly things were about to shift and who exactly was walking into the building. 5 minutes can feel like an hour when silence thickens the air. Officer Reed shifted his weight again. Something in him had started to itch, the kind of discomfort that doesn't come from being challenged outright, but from the quiet certainty someone else holds when they're not afraid of you. Aaliyah stood where she was not smug, not rattled, just still. Passengers kept trickling past. A man in khakis and a too-tight polo glanced at the scene, then back at his phone. A mother pulled her daughter a little closer. The atmosphere wasn't hostile. It was cautious, like everyone was waiting to see who was going to make the next move. Reed crossed his arms. "You always this dramatic." Aaliyah didn't even blink. "You always this wrong." He chuckled, but it didn't land. The confidence he'd come in with was fraying. The joke fell flat. A supervisor in a gray blazer stepped out from behind the glass doors leading to the administrative offices. Her name tag read, Supervisor Elena Cruz. She scanned the scene for half a second and walked briskly toward them. "Everything all right here?" she asked. Not casual, professional tight. "I've got it under control," Reed replied without looking at her. "I wasn't asking you," Cruz said. That was the first crack. Reed turned, clearly caught off guard. "This is routine protocol. Passenger was acting evasive." "She wasn't acting evasive," Cruz said, cutting him off. "She was standing in line with her documents in hand. I just reviewed the footage from 2 minutes ago." Aaliyah didn't speak. She didn't need to. Cruz turned to her. "Ma'am, do you feel unsafe?" Aaliyah met her eyes. "No, just tired. And being stopped without cause isn't exactly new to me." Cruz's jaw flexed just slightly. "I'm sorry you were made to feel like this. If you'd like to file a report, I can escort you to the office." Aaliyah nodded slowly. "Not yet. My father's on the way. I'll speak with him first." Something about that sentence made Cruz pause. "Your father?" But before Aaliyah could answer, 2 black SUVs rolled up to the curb just beyond the sliding glass doors, both parked in the zone usually reserved for shuttles and VIPs. The passenger side door of the lead SUV opened. A tall man in a navy suit stepped out, dark skin, gray at the temples, calm in the shoulders. His face was unreadable, but his walk said everything, purpose in every step. Not aggressive, not arrogant, just assured. A man who'd spent his whole life walking into rooms that didn't expect him, but leaving them changed. Aaliyah exhaled. Reed narrowed his eyes. "Who is that?" Cruz already knew. "That's Jonathan Harper," she muttered. "The Jonathan Harper." Reed asked, suddenly less sure of himself. "Owner of WestJet Air, and I believe one of the 5 major stakeholders in this terminal." Reed opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "You're telling me she's his daughter?" Jonathan entered through the glass doors like he'd done it 100 times. He didn't rush. He didn't scan the room for drama. He walked straight to his daughter. Aaliyah looked up and smiled, just barely, but it was real. "Hey, Daddy." He kissed her forehead. "You all right?" "I'm fine now." Jonathan turned to Officer Reed. "No." Hand extended, no formalities, just a slow, measured glance. "You the one who stopped my daughter." Reed straightened his back. "Sir, I was following—" "I didn't ask what you thought you were doing," Jonathan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it dropped heavy. Supervisor Cruz stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her. "Mr. Harper, I apologize. This wasn't cleared. I've already requested footage. We'll open an internal review." He gave her a nod. "I'd like a full report by end of day, and someone from your office will speak with my legal team." Then he looked back at Reed. "You saw a young woman standing in line, dressed clean with a first-class ticket, and your instinct was to embarrass her. You picked the wrong daughter on the wrong day." Reed couldn't speak, not because he had nothing to say, but because nothing he said would help him now. But the day wasn't over. What came next would pull back the curtain on more than just one officer's mistake. There are people who make noise when they enter a room. Then there are people who change the temperature just by standing in it. Jonathan Harper was the second kind. Airport staff began shifting as soon as they caught a glimpse of him. The front desk manager stood a little straighter. Two TSA agents who'd been watching from the hallway turned and pretended to busy themselves with paperwork. Even the airport police captain, Captain Marcus Flynn, was suddenly moving at a different speed, trying to catch up to what had already started unfolding. Aaliyah stood still while her father spoke. His voice even deliberate. He didn't raise it. He didn't have to. Reed had gone from smug to silent, his hands now tucked behind his back, like a kid waiting to be scolded. But Jonathan didn't yell. That would have been too easy, and frankly, too generous. He leaned slightly toward Reed. "Tell me what made you decide she was suspicious." Reed hesitated. "She seemed evasive." "No. She answered your questions clearly, repeatedly. I didn't recognize her name on the manifest." "Because you don't read the manifest. You're not airline staff." Reed's mouth opened, then closed again. Jonathan didn't look angry. He looked bored, like he'd seen this movie 100 times and didn't need to sit through the ending. "You weren't doing your job," Jonathan said finally. "You were flexing your badge because you could, because you thought no one would care." The silence that followed was the kind that fills every corner. Supervisor Cruz stepped forward gently. "Mr. Harper, I've already begun documenting the incident. I'll personally handle the follow-up." "I'm sure you will," he interrupted. "But let me be clear, I didn't come here for apologies." Her face tightened slightly. "Understood." Jonathan turned to Aaliyah. "Did he touch you?" "No." "Did he threaten you?" "No." "But he made you feel small?" Aaliyah nodded. That was enough. Jonathan looked back at Reed. "You will not be working this terminal again. Whether you keep your badge, that's for your department. But here you're done." Reed's throat moved as he swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm not sir to you." A second later, Captain Marcus Flynn stepped up. "Mr. Harper, I'll take it from here." Jonathan didn't even look at him. "Make sure you do." Flynn gestured to Reed. "Come with me." The officer hesitated just long enough to remind everyone he still believed in whatever authority he thought he had. But he followed. They disappeared behind a side door. For the first time in nearly 20 minutes, the air in the terminal began to breathe again. Supervisor Cruz exhaled slowly. She handled herself well. "She always does," Jonathan replied without missing a beat. "She's had practice." Aaliyah glanced down. She didn't want praise. She wanted this not to be a pattern. Jonathan turned to her. "You ready?" She nodded. "Let's go." They began walking toward the exit. The crowd had thinned. Some people had filmed part of it. Sure, she saw one teenage boy lowering his phone a little too late. But no one said anything. The respect in the air wasn't loud. It was quiet, measured. Like people knew something real had just happened even if they couldn't name it. Outside, the sun had dipped low behind the parking structure, casting long shadows across the pavement. The SUVs were waiting. The driver opened the door. But Jonathan held out a hand. "Aaliyah," he said, "walk with me." They passed the car and kept walking down the sidewalk away from the noise. "I knew something was wrong the second I answered," he said softly. "I kept thinking maybe it would stop," she said. "If I just stayed calm." "It was never about calm. I know you handled it better than I would have at your age." Aaliyah half smiled. "That's because you didn't teach me to yell. You taught me to aim." He gave a low laugh. "Well, seems like you hit your mark." But what Aaliyah didn't realize yet was that what happened next, once they got in that car, would stay with her far longer than the confrontation ever could. The SUV's back seat was cool and quiet, a small bubble of peace as the world outside continued spinning. Aaliyah leaned back and looked out the tinted window, watching the terminal shrink behind them. It felt further away than it actually was. Jonathan sat beside her phone in hand. He wasn't texting. He was scanning emails, fingers still eyes moving fast. "What's going to happen to him?" Aaliyah asked. Jonathan didn't look up. "Reed," he nodded. "That depends on his department. He might get suspended, maybe reassigned. He won't be back at LAX. Aaliyah exhaled. "That's it." He finally turned toward her. "You wanted more. I don't know. Part of me wanted him to be embarrassed the way he tried to embarrass me." Jonathan nodded slowly. "I understand that. But I'm not here to give people what they gave us. I'm here to make sure they don't do it again." Aaliyah was quiet for a second. "That's not justice. That's management." "It's both," he replied. "Sometimes cleaning house is how you start fixing the foundation." She didn't argue, but her jaw tightened. It wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. And she hated how quickly it was taken from her by someone who had no right to question it in the first place. As the SUV merged onto Century Boulevard, Jonathan's phone buzzed. He answered. "Go ahead." Pause. "Have legal reach out before noon tomorrow." Pause again. "Yes." He hung up and looked back at Aaliyah. "Your story's already circulating. Someone filmed it." "I figured," she said quietly. "They didn't get the whole thing, just the tail end. You standing your ground, me showing up. People will turn it into something it wasn't." He shrugged. "Let them. The truth is simple enough." Back at the airport, Officer Dawson Reed sat stiffly across from two internal affairs representatives in a small interview room. One wall had a clock, the other had a mirror he was sure was two-way. A laminated poster above his head read, "Accountability builds trust." He didn't speak much. The footage had already spoken for him. Later that night, the airline issued a statement, short, professional, and direct. "We do not tolerate bias, discrimination, or misuse of authority in any form. The incident involving Ms. Aaliyah Harper is being thoroughly reviewed in coordination with airport security leadership." Aaliyah's phone buzzed again. Messages poured in, some from friends who'd seen the clip, others from numbers she didn't recognize. A few were congratulatory. A couple were angry. "You're going to get reactions from both sides," Jonathan said calmly. "That's the nature of truth. It makes people uncomfortable." "I didn't want to be anyone's symbol." "You're not a symbol. You're my daughter, a person. This just happened, and you handled it." She looked down at her hands. "Why does it happen so much?" Jonathan was quiet for a moment. Then he said softly, "Because some people confuse authority with permission. They think a badge makes them bigger, smarter, safer. And when they meet someone who doesn't flinch, they feel small." The car stopped. The driver opened Aaliyah's door. She stepped out, then turned to face her father. "Do I have to keep proving myself every time?" He stepped beside her, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You don't have to prove anything. But when the moment comes, you show them who they're talking to." Aaliyah didn't smile, not quite, but there was something steady in her eyes now. "Then let them talk." But the real weight of what happened, what it meant for her, her name and her future would hit later. A quiet post she wrote reached over 1 million views overnight. The next morning felt heavier than usual. Aaliyah sat at the breakfast bar spooning yogurt she wasn't really eating. Her phone buzzed every few seconds. Notifications flashed like fireflies, Twitter threads, TikTok stitches, messages from strangers calling her brave, classy, beautiful. A few, of course, were hateful, always were. She didn't respond to any of it. The clip had gone viral overnight, barely 90 seconds of grainy phone footage of a young black woman standing tall, staring down a uniformed officer at LAX, the way she didn't raise her voice, the way she didn't shrink. But that wasn't the part everyone kept talking about. They talked about the moment Jonathan Harper stepped through the doors, the subtle shift in power, the way Reed's body language changed the second he realized who he was dealing with. Aaliyah refreshed her feed again. WestJet had reposted their official statement. Her name wasn't in it, but everyone already knew her father. He entered the room quietly dressed like he always was in the morning tailored slacks, dress shirt, no tie yet. He poured himself coffee and took the seat next to her. "You okay?" he asked. "I guess that doesn't sound like a yes," she exhaled. "I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. Part of me wants to pretend it didn't happen, but another part wants to go louder. Say everything I didn't get to say yesterday." Jonathan stirred his coffee. "So say it." "To who?" He looked at her like she already knew the answer. "People are going to twist this either way," she said. "They will. They'll say I played the rich girl card. Some will say I embarrassed him just to prove a point. And they'll be wrong." She leaned on the counter. "But what's the point of always being calm? What's the point of biting your tongue, standing straight, doing everything right if someone can still stop you, judge you, try to put you in a place they think you belong?" Jonathan let the silence breathe. "I used to think," she continued, "that if I was perfect enough I could outrun it, that if I dressed, the part spoke clearly, had all the right answers, maybe people would just let me live." He didn't interrupt. He knew this wasn't for him. "It didn't matter yesterday. I did everything right, and he still saw me as a threat or an inconvenience or a mistake." Jonathan nodded. "That's because his eyes weren't trained to see the full version of you, just a version he thought he already knew." Aaliyah swallowed. "So what now?" Her father reached over and tapped her phone. "You've got their attention. Say something worth hearing." That afternoon, Aaliyah sat at her desk and opened her laptop, not for drama, not for clout, just clarity. She typed slowly. "Yesterday, I flew home from Atlanta. I flew first class because my father gifted me the ticket for graduating early from my program at LAX. I was pulled aside without reason and questioned by a man who saw my presence as a problem. I've been taught to stay calm, to respond, not react. I did, but I shouldn't have had to. My father is a businessman, a leader. He's also a father who raised me to know my worth. That officer didn't know who I was, and that's the problem. Because respect shouldn't come from who your father is. It should come from who you are from the moment you walk in. I didn't post this for attention. I posted it because I'm tired of having to be composed in situations where I shouldn't be targeted in the first place. We don't want special treatment. We want equal treatment. Dignity has no dress code." She hit post, closed the laptop. No dramatic music, no fireworks, just truth. Her father passed behind her a few minutes later, resting his hand briefly on her shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. But the real moment of clarity, what this would mean for Aaliyah and others like her, would come in the days that followed. Strangers started reaching out with stories of their own. 3 days later, Aaliyah's inbox looked like a flood zone, not from brands or news outlets, though there were plenty of those, but from people. Real people. Dozens of emails, hundreds of DMs, and voice messages that cracked mid-sentence. Young women, older men, flight attendants, nurses, college students, a retired Marine, all saying the same thing in different words. It happened to me, too. There was no single story. One woman described being pulled aside at DFW and interrogated while her white co-worker passed without a glance. A high school student wrote about being trailed by mall security for wearing a hoodie while holding a violin case. One man shared how he'd flown with his daughter for the first time last year, and the gate agent triple-checked their boarding passes before finally letting them through after every other family had already boarded. Some messages were only a sentence or two, some were long, some were angry, some were tired. But every one of them landed the same. Aaliyah hadn't expected this. She didn't want to be a symbol like she told her father. But symbols are often just people who refuse to shrink in the wrong moment. And whether she liked it or not, people had seen something in her that day they needed for themselves. WestJet's board released a second statement, this time with her name. Jonathan didn't write it, but he read it before it went public. Aaliyah did too. We thank Ms. Aaliyah Harper for her composure and clarity during an incident that should never have occurred. While we regret what took place, we recognize the opportunity it presents to reinforce our values, not just in word, but in practice. Aaliyah didn't repost it. She didn't need to. Her original message had already been shared by educators, community leaders, even a few celebrities. But it wasn't the attention that moved her. It was the validation, the quiet confirmation that she wasn't alone. By the end of the week, Officer Dawson Reed was placed on indefinite administrative leave pending further review. Rumors circled online. Some said he'd been reported before. Others said he filed a formal complaint about how the incident was handled. But the facts were the same. He stopped the wrong woman for the wrong reason, and now he was facing the right consequences. Aaliyah's final moment of clarity came on a Thursday night. She sat outside on her parents' patio. The sky warm with the last stretch of dusk. Her mother had just gone inside to finish a call. Jonathan sat beside her, a glass of iced tea sweating onto the table between them. Aaliyah looked up at the stars, thinking out loud. I keep going back to that moment when he said, "You don't look like someone who flies first class." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. What would that person look like? I don't know. Someone quieter. Someone less visible. Her father was quiet for a second, then leaned in slightly. You know what I think? What? I think you look exactly like someone who belongs in first class. You just don't look like the version he made up in his head. And that's not your problem. Aaliyah smiled at that, a real one this time. You did good, he said softly. She nodded. So did you? He looked amused. I didn't do anything. You showed up. That was everything. They sat there a while longer, neither rushing to speak. And as the night deepened, Aaliyah opened her phone one last time and wrote one word above a black screen. Dignity is not something you earn from strangers. It's something you hold no matter who's looking. Then she closed the app, turned off her screen, and let the silence have the last word. Life lesson. Don't let anyone shrink your worth to fit their expectations. Your presence is your proof. If you believe in that, subscribe, because we've got more stories like this that need to be heard. What we've witnessed today is more than just a confrontation at an airport. It's a powerful reminder that dignity and respect should never be questioned or conditional. Aaliyah's courage teaches us that sometimes the quietest strength is the most unbreakable. If this story moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes, please help us amplify voices like hers. Like this video to support stories that matter. Comment below, share your thoughts or your own experiences. How do we change the way respect is given and earned? Subscribe to Soulful Stories 4 for more stories that shine light on truth, resilience, and humanity.